Welcome to the MuseCast, where we squeeze every last drop of inspiration out of Sunday's sermon.
Hey.
I don't know if that was some trickery, some tomfoolery, a little of both, but something just happened there.
Well, here the problem is I didn't know what my internet was like, and there's a little glitchiness. So I'm a quality control. That's what this is all about.
Yeah, he's wearing many hats today, folks. So he's trying to figure it out. But all right. So I'm going to start us off by saying Happy Muse Day.
Happy Muse Day. Is this our first of the year?
First of the year.
Wow.
First MuseCast of 2025. Wow. Look at us.
Yes.
Look at us go. We're just a couple of pros doing
this is the year.
Show.
This is the year it's really going to get good. So
it's really going to take off.
That's right. This is the year that we get professional.
I'm telling you. Hey, you premium subscribers. Let's see if I can even say the word. You premium subscribers. This is your time. You are going to be in awe of what the MuseCast brings you this year. And if not, that's okay too. He's Dan Kent. I'm Shawna Boren, and welcome to the MuseCast. It is the first show of 2025, and we kicked off the year by diving back into Revelation. We're all the way up to chapter 7, folks. 7. Can you even believe it? And we went 3 verses deep. Can you believe it?
Yeah. Yep.
That's incredible.
Yeah, I think the series and the sermons are going to start to go faster because as we go, now you just disappeared. Did you drop something?
Did.
Oh, okay. So I should have had it on speaker view because I still have it on how are you view. Welcome to the show view.
Listen, and Dan Kent, professional. Come on now.
Right. That's right. All right. So yes. So I think the sermons are going to start to go faster now. And because as we get into these cycles, we start to see some of the same things over and over again. And so there'll be more redundancy. So we'll be able to be more efficient through that, which will give us a sense of momentum, I think, going into the end, which I'm looking forward to. So so 7, we'll be doing this one for a little while, but then I think like 8 through 15, 8 through 17, I think those are going to go pretty quick, those chapters. That's my assumption, but who knows?
I think Dan is living, folks, in this place that many of us like to live in, at the start of a new year with hope and possibility, otherwise known as the grand illusion, because I don't know how quickly we're going to clip through, but you know what? It's all good. It's going to be, maybe I will be proved wrong. We'll see. It doesn't matter. It's all going to be good. So, Dan Kent, are you all recovered from the holidays? Are you ready to summarize it up? First summary of 2025 is a big deal.
Yes, I am. And I think I'm ready. I guess I'm ready. I just checked and I'm ready.
Okay. Checked with yourself and yourself said you're good. Okay.
Yes. Should I go?
Yeah. You're going to talk to us about branded.
Aha, right? You got it. I was just waiting. I was waiting for you to say it. So
new year, new me.
Hey, before I start, have you actually been to the Mojave Desert?
Dan Kent, this is the thing. When I wear hats, they either mean something to me or I like the color palette. I will not divulge which is which, but I'll just let you look and see, does it feel like a color palette's working there, or does it feel like that means something to her?
Okay. That makes sense. That makes sense.
There you go.
Well, branded is the name of the sermon for reasons that hopefully will become clear as I give the summary. I hope that people have actually watched the sermon also. The summary is really meant to just put some paint on the palette as we work our masterpiece on the MuseCast. So it's not meant to give a thorough review. So hopefully people have watched the sermon, and this is just a way of processing the sermon. Given that disclaimer, Greg starts off by not summarizing where we've been so far. And so that's sort of how he kicks us off. He also noted something that I think is important, that I forget. In fact, in my head, I thought that we had gone through the seven seals in chapter 6, but we had only gone through 6, and I keep forgetting that there is this intermission between 6 and 7, and we're going to find that in the next 2 cycles as well. He's going to go through 7 different items, and then there's always an intermission there. And then he just Greg kind of shared some insight about some of the confusing nature of this passage. He talked about how the verse mentions the 4 corners of the earth, the 4 winds, and the 4 corners of the earth. That's just like the earth itself, God's creation. And the 4 winds are sort of like these cosmic powers that are bent on destruction. It gets a little confusing there because there is this angel who comes to bring this message, and there are these other angels who are protecting the creation from the 4 winds. But then there is this permission given to the 4 angels to go ahead and do whatever destructive thing they're going to do. So it seems schizophrenic to say, well, the 4 angels that were meant to protect against the 4 winds, now suddenly are they talking about those 4 angels that are now have permission to cause destruction? Well, no, actually, that second time that the 4 angels is mentioned, it's referring to the 4 winds. It's very, very confusing, but that's the way to make sense of it, is there are these angels that God has protecting creation from the 4 winds, and the 4 winds themselves are, in fact, demons or destructive angels or destructive agents that are referred to that second time. So it's a little confusing. But the other thing that Greg wants to sort of elucidate or illuminate here is this idea of being sealed by the Lamb or sealed by God. What does that mean? And he looks at 2 different things. The first thing is that when we are sealed by God, we are protected. And so he kind of talks about some of the questions that surround that. What does it mean to be protected? Protected from what? Because you look at Christian lives and they don't seem protected. They get cancer, they get, disease, they die, they, get old and fall apart and all of that. They don't seem protected at all. In fact, a lot of Christians end up suffering even more than normal because they're martyred and they're persecuted. And so what exactly do we mean by protected? Well, what Greg argues is the protection there is a spiritual protection, because the big thing that's happening in reality is this spiritual cosmic warfare, this tug of war for God's people. And God is trying to gather people into himself, and so is the enemy. And when we are protected from that enemy. Whatever happens here on earth, ultimately we are protected from this enemy. Now, he also Greg, he went on this little kind of discussion about some people view this idea that we are protected as sort of a get out of jail free card that they can use whenever they want, and they could do whatever they want because, hey, I'm protected. I'm signed, sealed, and delivered. And so he shared an example, a story from when he was younger. This guy he met at a truck stop who was living free and wild and sinfully, and he thought that was okay because he was sealed and protected. And Greg made an argument that that's there's more to it than just that. The second part of what it means to be sealed is that it's a statement of where you belong. Who owns you? And this idea that if you're sealed or you're given this insignia, this stamp, this brand, and that's what the name of the sermon is from, it means that you are now the possession of whoever has branded you. And in this case, we are told that we are branded or we are sealed by God in the Lamb. And it's interesting because there's a lot in the New Testament, there's a lot of language about us being slaves to Christ, that we are slaves to God. And that's a weird type of language to use because slavery is just so inherently ungodly. And Greg talked a little bit about that too. He just talked about how, isn't it interesting that you take this human behavior that is so atrocious and so terrible, that is one person owning another, and what you see in the Christian story is God is using that to show something good and beautiful, and that is this idea that we are now possessed, but we are possessed by the ultimate source of goodness, the ultimate source of love, and we are bought. Not only are we possessed, but we are bought at this infinite price, and all of this takes place in a way that liberates us or ransoms us from this enemy who is the antithesis of good and love and light. And so becoming a slave to God is actually profound liberty and freedom from this terrible alternative that we are inherently in. And so he talks about how we are servants, or doulos is the Greek word, which is slaves to Christ. And yet, even though we are slaves, we are also rulers. And so and he just kind of mentioned a little bit about how this way of talking, beyond the fact that it's building on this kind of horrible institution that is slavery, it's also very different for us because we tend to glorify self-determination and independence and autonomy, and that tends to be like an idol for us, in fact. And he just shared some of these songs about, it's my life, and I did it my way, and all of that, and the Frank Sinatra song, and so this is sort of a very countercultural message. And although he didn't have much time to get into it in this sermon, he argues that ultimately it is in being a servant to God in Christ that actually makes us the most free. And hopefully we'll get to that more. And so really what you have here is you have this disjunct, these two ways, this one way where we cling to life in the world, and we cling to our autonomy, and we strive to get our best life now and get everything that we want, or we submit to God as our owner, that we are not our own, but we are God's, and we live as ambassadors to God. And that's just a radically different way to live. And then he ended with some prayerful reflection. But it's a good start to the series, and I think a good start to the new year. And that is my summary. So how do you think we started off this year with this series?
I think we started off, first of all, I want to say thank you, Dan, for summary of 2025. Nicely done. I think we started off this series, the first of the new year, really well, and also really challenging, which is about par for the course. So while many things will be new and fresh, some things will remain the same, and that is that we will be challenged through the scripture. And while I appreciate very, very much Greg showing, I'm going to say, some sensitivity to unpacking ownership and being a slave to Christ and branding and tattooing and all of that. I thought that was important for him to do, and he was sensitive to that. It still was a bit like hard to hear and think through and process. And then I'm reminded how, again, what we see, at least from my perspective, is we see God taking something that culture, humanity, the time in which these folks were living mean for utter gross, evil, dehumanizing behavior, and he turns it upside down and makes it into something, liberating and free. And I'm talking about, being a slave to Christ, like you just said. And so I just thought that was a great reminder. Loved the story about the trucker who was just living life the way that they saw fit. And then they found out Greg was a pastor, and they were like, oh, we're brothers. And so I say again, that's even challenging because there are many people who feel like, yep, I said a sinner's prayer, or I signed the card, or I made a commitment and I'm good to go. And it doesn't really matter how I live my life. And so Greg was really good at saying, hey, to those of you who that's your vibe, you may want to consider that that's not the best path forward. And to those who live like on the opposite end of the spectrum, where they feel like, woe is me, I am such a sinner, I can't help but screw up. I have done too much wrong in my life for God to really care or love for me. Like, you need to hear that, nope, you have been bought with a price. You have been ransomed. You are now taken in by God, and you are sealed. And so I thought it was a great way to present both aspects of that, and then challenging us to really like remind ourselves daily of how we submit to Christ. And submit is another word that I think people, especially in America, are like, don't be telling me what to do, right? It's
Right.
just,
Yeah.
we are so fiercely independent. We are so fiercely like, you're not the boss of me. And so just the challenge to submit to the call to submit to Christ. And but really, it's not a earthly submission. It's not the same thing as when you're being dehumanized by another human. This is a submission to God that does bring freedom and liberation and all the good stuff. And so again, he just takes something and he turns it upside down and gives it new meaning. And so
Yeah.
thought we hit the ball out of the park with challenging folks, teaching folks, encouraging folks, and so yeah, good start.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. I don't really have anything to add to that. You said something that I wanted to respond to. Um, but yeah, definitely we do not like this whole idea of submit, and most of us don't.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a coincidence that like one of the most popular funeral songs is "I Did It My Way." Although
Right.
although I have to say, I did have a friend once who he had a dependent personality, a dependent
Mm.
personality disorder. And at his funeral, they played "I Did It Your Way." That's what the song they played there. So not as popular of a song, but very appropriate for.
It was the B cut of that popular song. Gosh, you're ridiculous. Oh my word. Yeah, I do think that it's interesting, and we can chuckle and laugh. And maybe most of us aren't like, living the life and making the choices that the trucker that Greg encountered all those years ago were living. But in our own way, in our own lives, with our own choices, we are fighting for that independence and thinking that we can
Mhm,
just rely on ourselves or whatever. And
mhm.
this is a great reminder that like maybe we need to adjust that a bit.
Yeah.
Another little like warning signal. So
Yeah, and I think for me, like it's not that you lose your independence. It's not like you lose that autonomy. It's just where do you direct it? Are you directing your autonomy just to puff yourself up, or are you trying to use your autonomy and your say so for what God wants to do in the world? And
mhm.
part of that is benefits us too. So it's not like it's we're doing stuff that doesn't benefit us by working for God. No, of course, there's something in us that expands when we serve others. There's something in us that expands when we love the downtrodden, and there's something in us that floats when we do these godly things in the world, because we see goodness and we see godliness, and it warms our hearts when we see it. How much more so does it warm our hearts when we are the agent that brings it about? And so I think that it's a type of submission, but it's not like uh forced. It's not coerced. It's not, you're not a machine. You are freely learning how to leverage your autonomy and your freedom for these things that are so enriching, and also good for the kingdom.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is another example of one of the main themes that we've been hitting at throughout revelation, and it's just like uncovering, unveiling the deception and the lies. And I feel like that is a huge lie, a huge trick of the enemy, as my dad would say, to make us think that by yielding, by submitting and aligning, that we somehow become less, that we become a puppet, and that we lose our freedom. And I think that's a trick that if we get into that mindset, we're going to miss the beauty and the liberation and the freedom that comes from that alignment and that submission, because he we know that God comes, Christ came to set us free and to give us abundant life. And abundant life to me doesn't mean that like I have no say so and I'm just, this, this isn't my puppet, I guess. My puppet hands.
That's totally that's going to be on the 2025 blooper reel. You know that.
Probably is. You are so right. But yeah, I just think it's a trick of the enemy to make us think that, by giving our life away, we're really losing instead of gaining all of the things. And I skipped over this, but I did want to like get your perspective on this a little bit more, because you did talk about it in your summary. That first point of sealed, when you were talking about how Greg shared with us what that meant, and it means protected, but from what? Because you and I have talked a ton about, one of our favorite verses that we share in common is, in this world you will have trouble, but take heart. Take heart, I have overcome the world. And so we are never promised a coast. We are never promised an easy ride. This isn't, the log ride that you just go down the lazy river. Like, no, there are going to be circumstances and turbulences and troubles, but we don't face those things alone. And so I think that was an important aspect of these passages that Greg unpacked for us, that the protection is a spiritual protection, because we are in a battle, we are in a warfare. And I just didn't know if you wanted to shed some more light on that or move on.
Yeah. Well, I don't know what kind of light I can shed on it, because I think it's, I don't know what I can say succinctly. I would just say that, I think that what's going on in the kind of battle for our souls, if you want to say, is this language of ransom suggests that remember the game Hungry Hungry Hippos?
Yes,
where like all the marbles, and then the hippos would try to get as many marbles as you can. That's like a really dumbed down version of how I see spiritual warfare, where I do think, and we see this in a lot of literature too, and the Screw Tape Letters is a good example, where the enemy is trying to win us over. And the fact is that the enemy is really good at it. And the principalities and powers and the schemes of the devil are effective, and they're so good. And Satan comes as an angel of light, and he dupes and he deceives. And I think part of being sealed is that if you are in Christ, then it just expands, or it increases the scope of kind of grace there. You have now, whereas, if you didn't have God's grace and you just had to be godly, and well, that would be really hard when you have an enemy who is trying to thwart you. It's almost as if like if you were trying to play chess, and you were playing against a supernatural opponent, and like he could change your vision. So you're about to move a piece, and in your mind, it looks like you're moving a knight, but in fact, you have just moved your queen. And because that's how messed up we get, we don't see reality for what it is. In the Old Testament, actually, it's a restatement from the Old Testament. It's in the Apocrypha. It's in Sirach, where God says, I have placed before you life and death, blessings and curses, fire and water. Reach out your hand for whichever you choose. Now, we all want to reach out for the water, and yet so many times we reach out for the fire. And it's not because we want fire. It's because we can't tell the difference. We think it's water. We think it's good. And that's, that's, I think, part of what being sealed is that, look, now you're playing this game of chess where you're being manipulated and you're being deceived, and sometimes you don't know which pieces you're moving. And so you might make some big mistakes, but it doesn't matter because you have been sealed. It doesn't matter as long as you are dedicated to God. If you are a slave to Christ, if you are that devoted to God, then you have this seal, and there's like this new freedom to just mess up. There's this freedom to kind of play the game without the anxiety, without this demand of perfection and stuff like that. That's kind of loosey goosey, but I think that's kind of part of how I would look at that. And there's a lot more nuance there, but in such a short time, I don't know what else I could say.
No, you did great. I also think it's important to which gets back to the story that Greg shared about the truck driver and or the gentleman who drove a truck for a real living. I don't want to, anyway. I think it's so important to remember, this isn't like, okay, are we doing the right things? Are we following the right rules so we can check off everything on the list? So, yep, we're good. This is about a thriving relationship with the Almighty, which should hopefully impact us to the degree that we want our life to look different, that we want our life to stand for something, that we want to walk away from the things that maybe ensnare us and entrap us. We want to be we want the truth to be unveiled, and we want the deception to be called out. It's very different than hey, I'm good, so I can do whatever I want and it doesn't matter. I mean, if that's your mindset, then yes, God loves you, but man, what are you missing? What thriving relationship, what glorious thing are you missing with this being, this creator that loves you so much, And I my hope is that people are being reminded of that and awakened to that through this part of the series.
Yeah. Yep, that's well said.
All right. Hey, guess what? We got a question from Special K.
Yes.
Do you want to unpack that a bit?
Let's do it.
Okay. So I feel like, Dan, because you and I, we read the question so we know the context of it, but our audience, of course, doesn't. So I feel like, unless you tell me differently, I'm just going to read it as Special K sent it in. And then you can, okay, great. We are ransomed by Jesus. We once were slaves to the dark powers, but when we covenant with Christ, we are now rather slaves to him. Jesus is now our new master. Greg also mentioned how the Apostle Paul always writes that he is a slave to Christ. So how does that fit in with John 15:15? What did Jesus mean by telling his disciples that he no longer calls them servants, slaves, but friends? I suppose a slave could be your friend at the same time. I don't know. Help me out here, please. Special K.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, this is just worthless now. Thanks a lot, Special K.
Way to go, Special K.
This whole time I thought this book was coherent and made sense, but I guess not.
Nope.
No. It's a good question, and I think here's what I would say. Is when every time the Apostle Paul talks about, in fact, I'm going to pull up a verse here. Every time the Apostle Paul talks about being a doulos Christos, which is slave of Christ, it's always about who he belongs to and who he's owned by. So, for instance, you can really see that in this passage here. This is Galatians 1:10, where it says, am I trying to win approval from human beings, or am I trying to win approval from God? Who am I trying to please here? Am I trying to please people, or am I trying to please God? and if I were still trying to please people, if that were the case, if I was trying to please people, then I would no longer be a slave to Christ or a servant of Christ, doulos Christou. And so what Paul is really focusing on here isn't that the slavery type posture. It's this: who am I owned by? Who am I serving? Who am I pleasing? I'm not here to win approval from people. That's a dumb thing to be a slave to, and we see that in the world. We've probably even experienced. I have, where you're trying to please people and you're trying to be good enough for those around you. What a terrible slavery that is. Paul is saying, I don't have that slavery because I know where I truly belong. I know who my true master is. Why would I live my life as if other people are my master? Because when I'm in this people-pleasing behavior, that's exactly what I'm doing. I am bowing down to these other people. But that's not the case. I am not a slave to people. I am a slave to God. And so that's where that's the baseline. That's the foundation of what Paul is saying. And I don't think that is inconsistent with what Jesus talks about, because he says this in the verse before verse 15. He says, "You are my friends if you keep my commands. You are my friends if you obey, if you covenant, if you dedicate yourself to me, then we're friends. And I no longer call you slave, I call you friends." But the underlying kind of belonging, the underlying submission is still there. That's absolutely still there. In fact, what I think is being said here, and I think it's just so radical, in our world, submission competes with friendship. If I were like a sycophant, if I were a suck up, if I were just so worried about pleasing others, and you see this in life, it's really hard to have a relationship with a person like that. And I don't think God wants us to be like that with him either. I think he wants us to be dedicated to him. But the difference is, I think, is it's when we give ourselves to God that I think that's what sort of helps mold us into the types of people that are now compatible with a relationship with God. And we'll talk about this in March. We're going to be doing this discipleship series that's in my mind all about becoming real people, becoming the types of people that God wants us to be, not just because God has a certain preference for one type of person over another, but because in order to have an eternal agape love relationship, you need to be a certain type of person. It doesn't work if you're lustful, greedy, violent, all of those things. You really have to nurture a heart that is humble, and a heart that is loving, and a heart that is tender and gentle. That's the only thing that works eternally. And so by submitting to making Christ our master and being a slave to Christ and to this eternal love, that's what shapes us and makes us capable of actually then being a friend of Christ. That's my answer. It's a great question, and that's the best I could do. Do you have anything that you to add to that?
I'm still noodling on your response. And the only thing, which thank you for that, I thought that was really helpful and good. The only thing that I thought of when I read Special K's question was, if you want to just look at it in a very carnal way of ownership, slave master, which honestly, it's really hard for me to even use that kind of language. It's just hard for me. I'm just going to be honest. But when you can switch mindsets to having a benevolent master, one that is loving toward you and one that does not mean you harm, that is like ages better than the alternative, right? But then in my brain, it's like, but Jesus is saying, I'm even more than that. I'm not just a benevolent master. I see you now as my friends, as we are in this relationship. Like you are close to me. And so that's the kind of the first kind of place I went. I think I like the way that you dove in a little more because it was a bit more nuanced. So that's all I will add to that. And I will
Hmm.
just say thank you, Special K, for
Yeah.
giving us more to think about. It's always appreciated.
Yeah. I think I'll leave it at that. But in fact, I just came up with my nugget. So that's great.
Oh, well
Yes.
then, first nugget of 2025. Are we ready? Five,
Is it?
six, seven, eight.
Oh, wait, hold on, hold on.
Was
Hold
it?
on, hold on, hold on, hold on. Nugget cam.
Oh,
Hold on. It's I screwed it up.
oh.
I'm okay, there we go.
Okay,
Woo!
nugget time. It's nugget time. Dan, I cannot wait to hear your nugget. Lay it on us.
Well, I guess I have to go first now. So yeah, I guess here would be my nugget. Even if you took the most literal language around the kind of you are a slave to Christ, even if you took that in terms of like he is my master, I am his slave. I don't know why you would talk like that if that were the case, but maybe maybe that's what's required. I don't know. Um, but you look at what kind of master Jesus is, and he tells us, he says that take my yoke upon you, for I am gentle and humble. And that, boy, that's so even if it's that literal, he is a gentle master. And here's the other thing I would say about it is even if it was harsh, even if the teaching or the sovereignty, even if that was a harsh sovereignty, I still think it's good because you look at like just take one kind of dimension of human nature. You look at like people trying to lose weight. You look at like the extreme punishment people put themselves under on these weight lift or weight loss programs, and they sacrifice so much and they cause themselves so much pain and suffering, and a lot of times the programs don't even work. And if you were to tell that person, listen, I can guarantee you that this program over here will get you what you want, but it's hard work and it's toil. They would jump at it if they knew that that was the answer. And so, even I think on a bigger level, even if God was a harsh master, which he's not, I still think it would be worth it because there would be this guarantee that the result would be good. Because we are now talking to the source of all goodness, the creator of everything good, the creator of us, and the ultimate destination of everything is in God. And so even if Jesus was a harsh master, that would be okay. He's not a harsh master, though. He is a gentle master, and not only is he a gentle master, but he is a friend, and that's just so beautiful.
Mm, so beautiful. Thank you, Dan. My nugget is going to go a little different. I have been ruminating on the word submit. It's another one of those words that I'm like, I kind of get the hives when I say it. I don't know why. But anyway, I really was listening to what Greg said, and I was really challenging myself to be honest and ask myself, like, where in my life do I kind of go my own way? Do I, act independent as if God wouldn't have an opinion or a thought or a say in something? I'm not talking about, oh, should I park here? Should I park there? I'm not talking about that. Now, if that's something that benefits you, wonderful. I'm not bagging on that. I'm just saying, like, I do feel like sometimes I get into autopilot and I just assume that I know what I need to do and how I need to do it and where I need to go and da 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 da. And I'm wondering now if there are moments in which I'm missing out on something beautiful that God would have for me because I'm just not considering his perspective. I'm just not considering maybe he would have something to say about that choice or that decision or that direction. And it's never from a place of malice, but as much as I want to think that I am submitted to him, I know there are moments where I'm just like, oh, I know what to do. I don't even need to ask. I'm gonna do what I know to do. And so, again, I'm not feeling beat up by it, but I'm challenged. I am challenged to take an honest look at just my life and the things I do on the daily. And am I acknowledging that I am his, that I am sealed by him, that I belong to him? And then how does that impact what I'm doing in any given moment or day? So that is what I am challenging myself with. And again, I say, hey, come on into the party if you want to experience some of that as well. There you go. Enjoy. That's my nugget.
Man, that's good. That's good. And what a great thought for the beginning of the year too. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Awesome. Dan Kent, we got her done. First
Yes.
MuseCast of 2025.
Yeah. Hey,
thank you guys. Go ahead.
high five, Kama, because the first one of 2025. So yeah, there you go. Boom.
We are cracking on all cylinders, man. Hey, thank you for starting another year with us. And we look forward to chatting 4 p.m. Central Time, YouTube. We look forward to seeing you there. Thank you for sending in your questions. And if you have anything more, Dan is showing you right now, musecast@whchurch.org.
Also, John or Sarah, whoever's watching this, don't forget to pull that Muppet puppet clip that Shawna did earlier for the blooper reel.
I don't know that they need to do that.
I'm just saying.
He's just being helpful, folks.
I'm being helpful.
All right, you guys, thank you so much for tuning in. We appreciate the heck out of you, and we will see you next week. Take care.